It's been such a privilege having Brian Helsby here in the studio this week, sharing stories from his new book, God's Love Stories. So we've got one more for the week. Thanks, Brian.
Well, 1 Corinthians 13 ends this little passage on love that says, love never fails. Love never fails. How powerful is that? Most of my life I've done youth work with Youth for Christ and with my church. And for 35 years of my life, I actually actively ran a youth group somewhere, Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, Johannesburg. Just loving young people and seeing the power of God demonstrated in the lives of young people. And the book has many of these stories of God's love demonstrated to young people. But let me just end our time together with the story of Natalie. Natalie was in a children's home that Youth for Christ was running in Durban. And when I was national director visiting Durban, I was asked if I wanted to go with Natalie to visit her baby because she had a baby about a year old, and she had been living on the streets and prostituting herself in order to survive. And now had a 1-year-old baby, but was now safe in a children's home. And so we went to visit Natalie's baby that was living in a different children's home. And as I walked into this dormitory where all the babies were, the younger babies, like Natalie's baby, were in little cots. But there was a group of about 30 babies between the age of 1 and 3 standing around a house mother who had one big pot of porridge and one spoon and was trying to feed all these kids. Half the kids, when they saw me walk in the door, left the house mother and they came and stood at my feet with their arms lifted up, wanting to be picked up. And so I picked up the first child, hugged it and put its cheek next to mine and prayed that somehow this child would experience God's love. And then I put it down, picked up the next child and the next child. And noticed that once a child had been hugged, they went back and got another mouthful of food. Once they got another mouthful of food, they came back to be hugged again. And so it went on, hug after hug. And eventually, even with my body, I got tired. And so I sat on the floor and all these kids just swarmed all over me. And eventually, Natalie came back and they dug under the children, they found me, and they took me home. The next morning, I woke up early in the morning, and I just remembered and pictured all those kids not knowing me, a stranger, but desperate to be loved, desperate to be held. And I thought of the world in which we live, of how people are so desperate for some kind of love. And we are called not to pick people up, but to sit on the floor with them. It's a lot easier than picking them up. And to sit on the floor and to love them where they are and to allow God's love to flow in us and through us. And we can make a difference as we share God's love.
Well, Brian, thank you. It's been so inspiring hearing you speak today here in the studio, and I'm sure that everyone who's listened has enjoyed it. I've got my copy of the book. I can't wait to read it. Where can the listeners go and find this book so they can read?
Yes, well, you can always write your heartlines and you can look us up. But the easiest is to go to Takealot or to Amazon, which is now in South Africa, and also Kindle. You can get a soft copy on Kindle.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian, and thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope that Brian's stories have inspired you to go and love like you have been loved.